So here we are, boys. We find ourselves in our third episode, our third installment of the Unashamed Truth, and we're here. We're lucky enough to be graced by the presence of our good buddy, friend of the podcast, who's been leaving comments and supporting us in what we're doing. Our friend Joey.
Yes.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
We thought rather than have you comment down below, just may as well have you just here with us and have you commenting in real time. So we're really thankful that you're able to make it to join us in discussing these topics that we have, man.
Well, thank you. Thanks for pulling me out of Trollsville.
There you go. So, boys, how was your week? How have you guys been?
Good. Been good until today.
Yeah, same here. Same here. I definitely feel that. You, Dwight, how has it been?
Pretty good, man. I'm just kind of noticing. It seems like the good weather is meaning that COVID is over.
Right.
I guess.
Yeah, right.
I didn't get the memo, but I guess COVID is done because everybody's outside.
My question is, when are we going for barbecuing at Avignon Park?
Yo, barbecuing at any park for me is done. Until there's a vaccine, I don't care what nobody says, man. Shoot me if you want to. Until
your house, man.
All right, I don't mind a small gathering. We cook some food in the backyard, but man, not this.
Not this for you, right?
No, man. And especially like I heard, so we have a few people that we lost that are family to my father-in-law, so family to me, this past week. And then I heard a story today that just completely put chills, up my spine. And it's a lady who she was on dialysis, and that's why it hits a little close to home. She was on dialysis. She went to get her treatment at the hospital, and that day she presented with a slight fever. Anybody who knows anything about dialysis knows that it's very common for people who are in dialysis to have little fevers, and they're more prone to infection as it is. Right. But an infection does not necessarily mean that you have something like COVID, right? Yeah. So the lady was refused at the hospital and told to go back home. Yeah. She was denied her opportunity to do her dialysis, and she's one of those patients that has to go in like 3 times a week sort of thing. So she called the hospital. She was trying to get them to accept her to come in to do dialysis, and they ended up just turning her away, refusing her. And at one point it escalated to her daughter calling the hospital and trying to urge them to let her in. And they were like, contact your lawyers if you have an issue. They classified her as a COVID patient, and they refused to treat her. And unfortunately, this lady passed.
Oh.
Yeah. So, you hear stories like that, and you're just like, what the hell is going on? Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's why it was
suffering too, because when you need to filter your blood, that's a pretty uncomfortable state, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And I don't know, Joey, we haven't really spoken, but like my dad is now on dialysis. He's fortunate. When you say like, you count your blessings, to see that my dad is home and not having to go to the hospital to do dialysis, like I couldn't be more thankful, that he's not having to expose himself to this situation, So, man, my heart is just like broken today by all this kind of bad news just arriving all at the same time,
Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't want to be in a gloomy mood. Like we had some stuff to talk about today that is just interesting. It's an interesting perspective. So we're starting our series called You're Not Blank Enough, in which we wanted to kind of start to take on a few different topics and kind of just examine stereotypes and what stereotypes sometimes we end up ourselves facing within our communities, because it's one thing to have people on the outside stereotype you and say, you're Black, you must be like this, you must be a bad person, you must be whatever. But then it's another thing within your community to have people start to stereotype you and say, you don't qualify, you don't meet my standards of being, whatever. So for this first episode, and this came up in a little bit of a brainstorming session, we wanted to examine the first part of what it means sometimes when people say that you're not black enough. So I think, as men of color, it's all happened to us to a certain extent, because different groups of people have different associations with what it means to be black, and I made the joke a little bit earlier with the guys, that as a kid growing up, you would hear your parents sometimes say, like, if you had a friend who was allergic to something and they were West Indian, they would say, man, how are you allergic? You're West Indian. You know what I mean? You're not West Indian if you're allergic to this food or something like that. Or if you have some weird, funky allergy, you're Canadian. You know what I mean? You're not.
Eating spicy food,
Yeah, you can't eat spicy
I can't
food.
eat spicy food,
Yeah.
What kind of African are you?
Right. I like to keep my intestines intact. So we've, growing up in high school, this is the last one I'll share and I'll let you guys have the floor. But growing up in high school, I sucked at basketball, man. And I remember there was one guy on the basketball team. He was like the star player of our year, right? And he used to walk down the hallway sometimes, and he'd see me and just get mad and be like, "Yo, you're tall for nothing. Like, you're tall for nothing." Because basketball wasn't my thing. For me, I was about music. That was where I decided to put my focus and my energy and stuff like that. And it was what I was passionate about, Not that I didn't like sports. I love sports. I loved playing sports growing up. I used to bike. But I used to do all the sports that were unconventional. I used to play hockey, not at the time, not really a black sport.
Yeah.
I used to like biking, although biking is, but I mean, growing up as a kid, I wanted to be like in the Tour de France one day, Never happened. I'm too lazy for that, but yeah. So you guys, what experiences have you had?
Well, the first person who never told me I wasn't black enough was a white kid. But actually, he was my best friend, and we went to go visit my aunt and uncle in New York.
Mhm.
And so my family was driving down, and we took him along with us. And he was big into basketball, and he was a big Jordan fan. He was a Bulls fan, and I wasn't. I was kind of like you, like I wasn't big on basketball. I liked playing sports and all that, but basketball wasn't really my thing. I played it with my friends, but I wasn't obsessed with it like some of my friends were. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I remember just like we were in like on the long drive to New York, and he was like he was talking, he was all into it. So he's talking a lot about basketball and different teams, and he was like, he's talking about Magic Johnson, and he was kind of quizzing me on.
Yeah.
There was like a lot of famous basketball players' names that I knew, and I knew them just because their persona like came outside of the basketball game, and it came into commercials and movies and things like that. Mm-hmm. So I knew like who is who. But he's quizzing me like, okay, so who's on which team? So he's like, which team does Magic Johnson play for? And I was like, Orlando Magic.
Yeah.
At some point, he was just showing me up, like that I don't know what he's talking about. And then he's just like, he's like, I'm blacker than you, and he was a white kid. Oh, I was like something like that, and that stuck with me though. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What?
I get you. I just want to give a little shout out to Gary. Gary commented, and he said, growing up he played hockey, and I'm glad and I'm thankful to see another person who who shared our experience.
Yeah, man, for sure. Lots of people, but my first experience too came from within the community. Me and Terry growing up in our neighborhood, it was a predominantly black or multicultural neighborhood. It's like, and anyways, so growing up, we were those kids that mom and dad would make us come home at different segments of the day. We wouldn't just be able to play outside all day. We'd have to come home and shower and change, and always had to look proper, always look good. And to the kids in the neighborhood, they found us to be, you know, not black enough because we were the kids that always that always looked proper, you know, always looked clean kept and everything, right? And so they had it was a problem that came to shoving matches, came to, you know, we were bullied because of it. You know, we were all those things. I remember that, you know, growing up, that was my first experience of, you know, you're not black enough.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. For me, it was like when basically I moved to Canada from Zimbabwe, and I'd you know, black friends, Afro Canadian friends, and they'll say like, "Dude, how come you don't eat spicy food? You know, you should have high tolerance." I'm like, I don't know. And a major part where it kind of hit me was, you know, Black History Month. You know, about like slavery and everything. This is something that was not necessarily part of my history, right? Like growing up in Zimbabwe, it was about, you know, the British colony taking over our country, and that's it. You know, I didn't know much about, like, you know, slaves being taken from Africa, you know, brought to different parts of the world. That was not part of like
The history you were taught.
My history growing up, or even part of the education growing up.
Wow.
And expressing that to some of my black friends here at the time, it was like, dude, how can you claim that you're black? You don't even know the history. I'm like, dude, I was born in Africa. I was born in Zimbabwe. Okay? Like, this is not something that was like part of our experience. We don't even have a Black History Month. You know what I mean?
Every day you're celebrating Black history.
We're celebrating Black History Month. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like this was something that was like super foreign to me, you know?
Yeah.
And that's when I realized like I didn't, like, you know, fit in. That I was not black enough. That maybe I was too African, which is not black enough in their eyes, you know?
Yeah, I get you.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
That's an interesting.
You mentioned that, and it's actually very interesting. Sorry, Joey, to cut you off, but I'll just say quickly, you know, like our perspective as African Americans, you know, we identify as people that have been wronged. You know what I mean? So that is our identity. You know what I mean? We don't,
part of it, at least.
You know, part of it. You know, that what I mean specifically when I say that is, we identify as a people that don't have a history. So this is our history.
Right.
You know? This is us. You know what I mean? This is who we are. So, you know, when you say something like that, it's almost like eye-opening. You know, it's like, man, you know, like what is it like to have that? You know, what is it like to predate that?
Yeah, exactly. I was earlier this year. I was listening to, last year, I was listening to a podcast, and they were talking about this company that does ancestry tests, right? And it's so, you know, there's ancestry.com or whatever, which is a test everybody knows, but then there's one called African Ancestry. Okay, and what's great about this test in particular is that they trace back further than just literally the slave registry that was signed with, okay, these are the names or where people came from. It actually goes back to the DNA level, and it checks like what your roots are. So like what tribes you would be from, and it tells you like how much of your lineage is actually African, and then how much is, you know, possibly European, this, that, right? And I found that that's really interesting, and it's funny because it got me to thinking, you know, like, you know, my last name being what it is, you know, is really the last name that comes from, you know, historically what we were given as a last name, but not really what my last name is. And I was thinking about how detrimental it is because, you know, you see historically that they've been trying so hard to deny parts of history, deny parts of what it is being black, right? By changing history books. I sent you guys a link to a video on that, and I would like to. I'm going to probably share it like in a comment below later on for people if they want to check it out. But talking about how Southern history in the United States has been trying to just eliminate parts and remove kind of the responsibility of white people so that they don't feel as bad. And teachers, one of the guys comments that teachers have been saying, I feel uncomfortable having to tell the kids about this. But it's like, well, it's a part of history. If you don't want history to repeat itself, you have to learn from history. If not, what's the point of history? What's the point of documenting things, right? And yes, there are atrocities, but if you want kids to understand some of the issues that exist today, then they need to understand what were the things that led to it. You know, seeing a black man, okay, and understanding why it is problematic to see a police officer assault him in the street, right? Like, you have to understand that there's a huge history behind that, and that's what people are getting so upset about. That's why people are refusing to stand for the anthem and this and that. It's not just because Colin Kaepernick is doing it and then everybody's saying, oh, that's a cool idea. No. There's a huge history, a very dark and nasty history behind a lot of these things, and that's what people take issue with, you know. And unfortunately, what happens is, and I think this is probably going to be the place to transition to this little clip because it's going to open up our discussion even more. But people have made mistakes historically in the past, and they've never been really held accountable for some of these things. And they're able to then pick and choose the good parts of their story to try to push their agendas and promote themselves. So the clip I want to share with you guys is a clip from an interview that happened on the Breakfast Club with an interviewer by the name of Charlemagne the God. And for those of you who have not seen it, I watched the whole interview, and I have to say that like it was almost hilarious at a certain point to see like at what point Biden, who a lot of African Americans appreciated when he was, you know, the vice president for President Obama, he was having to kind of backtrack, and he's been getting a lot of heat because, yes, fine, he was beloved to us when he was with Obama, but prior to that, he had done some things that he's having to kind of take responsibility for. Yeah. And now he's trying to boast the good things he's done for the African American community. So I just want to switch over to the clip. I'm going to play it, and then we'll be able to kind of dissect it a little later. But there's a very awkward moment that he's created that I think you guys may see a little humor, and I find it a little funny, but we'll address it in a second. All right, so let me just play it for you guys. 1 second.
Just the volume a bit.
Sorry.
Are y'all able to hear it?
No.
I don't hear him, man.
Not just me.
Oh, I'm sorry, guys.
All right.
I thought I had shared it with the computer audio. Let me just double check again.
We saw the video for you. We just couldn't hear it.
Okay, Chrome tab. Okay. Sorry, guys.
It's the wrong screen now, huh?
Yeah.
Do that to black media.
Do you guys hear it? Okay. Good.
I don't do that to white media and black media because my wife has to go on at 6 o'clock. Okay. Oh, I'm in trouble. Listen, you got to come see us when you come to New York, VP Biden. I will. It's a long way until November. We got more questions. You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black, It don't have nothing to do with Trump. It has to do with the fact I want something for my community. I would love to see
Take a look at my record, man. I extended the voting right 25 years. I have a record that is second to none. The NAACP has endorsed me every time I've run. I mean, come on. Take a look at the record.
All right, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Anyway, thanks. I will come back.
So
that is an awkward line, though. How did he become the front runner for the Democrat?
Joey, what are your thoughts, man?
Oh Lord.
it's awkward, man, because like first of all, you know, fine. He was working with President Obama. People liked him then, you know. Everybody liked the bromance that was happening between the two of them. But he was a legislator prior to this, and he was one of the legislators responsible for the 94 crime bill, right? Which is the same crime bill that has led to incidents like the incident that has become viral that everybody's been talking about today, where you have George Floyd, who was arrested by police officers. A police officer puts his weight on his neck and chokes him out, even though he's in the middle of the street saying, "I can't breathe," asking to be let up. And, you know, and from the video, you could tell that this guy was no longer with us. You know what I mean? So fine now, you know, Biden may have some good things he's done in his record, but he has some things that he still carries. And there's a legacy, a negative legacy, unfortunately, that he still has to take responsibility for. You know?
Yeah, definitely.
I agree. You know, that's the, you know, I think he's kind of running off of the fumes of the Obama, you know, the Obama campaign, the Obama history, that feel good, you know, that feel good. Yes, we can, you know, slogan and whatnot. But you know, this is 2020.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've seen a whole other reality. You know what I mean? And it's not enough now to say, oh, you're for the people. It's time to be about the people. You need somebody that's willing to stand up and get in the trenches. You know, we need to be able to actually scratch that. We need to be able to promote somebody from within the trenches.
Yeah, absolutely.
Up to these ranks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That is from the people. Forget
Exactly.
You know, forget this whole credentials thing, check my credentials thing. We need to know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The whole thing about check my credentials, to me, it sounds like the same comment that like white folks with black friends say, you know, like, oh, you know, I have a black friend.
Yeah.
I'm not racist. I have a black friend. I'm not racist. That's exactly the same thing that Biden is saying right now, to say, check my record. It's the exact same thing.
I've always had that vibe from Biden, like, well, throughout the whole campaign. And I mean, even, you know, even before that, like, I always kind of felt like that was his, you know, he kind of felt like the black community in the States was going to be a given for him, which it kind of was because of Obama. But now it's at the point that it's like, what are you actually going to do, you know, for black people?
Yeah. That's
like, they supported you. They put you there now, you know, they put you at the front of the Democratic Party. So what are you going to actually do?
Right.
Exactly.
That legislation that you were talking about that, you know, disproportionately affects black people in the way it does. How are you going to fix that? You know, I don't know. Wasn't anyone asking him that?
Exactly. And, you know, it's fine and dandy now, right? Like, in the interview, if you watch the whole clip, you know, they talk about like even drug reform laws that they're putting in place and how they're trying to help people who have been through who've been incarcerated because of drug offenses. They're trying to free them, right? But if you look at it, a lot of these people don't understand how severe it is when you have a criminal record in the United States. Having a criminal record is almost like a lifelong sentence, right? And I remember, okay, when I was in Tampa, we're in an area that was close. That was called Hillsborough County. Okay, so I remember I was driving from my office to my place, which was not far. You know, we're like probably a 10-minute drive at most, right? And I passed by this complex, and it's huge, like barbed wire fence and everything like that, and it said, Hillsborough County Jail on it. Okay. And now, so for me, I've just always made the distinction: jail and prison to me was the same thing. Okay, that's how clueless I was about the distinction between the two. Okay, but for perspective, the Hillsborough County Jail was bigger than the Bordeaux prison in Montreal.
Wow.
Oh.
It was that big of a complex. And I remember I was driving by with the guys who were going to lunch, and they're like, that's the county jail. I'm like, oh, okay, like, are there murderers in there? And the guys laughed at me. They're like, no, that's jail. We're not talking about prison. That's just a jail. You know what I mean? And this thing is like, it's in an industrial neighborhood. Like let's say you're driving out to the West Island from Ville Saint Laurent, and you're taking Henry Bourassa, how you drive through that like industrial neighborhood. It was a neighborhood just like that. You know what I mean? Not far away from it is residential, places and stuff like that. But I mean, you look at this and you're like, yo, this is really a machine in the United States,
Yeah.
That's
So yeah.
I can't even wrap my head around that.
Yeah.
They have privatized like jails and prisons in the States is another issue because they incentivize putting people in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like to turn a profit. So like it's in their best interest to have prisoners.
Yeah. That's it. That's why this, as comical as this is, and Biden has issued an apology for the statement that he made, but the reality is that there needs to be accountability held for these types of things. And unfortunately, right now, the only thing really that he has going for him is because a lot of people cannot tolerate who's currently in office.
Exactly.
You understand what I mean? So it's not even really a vote of confidence. It's just like, get this other idiot out of office.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But
the lesser of two evils situation. But
exactly.
A huge lesser of two evils.
Yeah. I don't want to, like, there's been a lot of talk about his condition, about Biden's condition, and if he's even really fit, because he seems, his age is starting to show. I'll put it that way. I want to keep it polite, and I don't want to sound like I'm being mean, towards people that are older. But you could tell that he, you know what I mean? Like, when you visit like a grandparent, and they're at that stage.
Getting hot here. Increase my air condition. Terry, go.
That's the you got to entertain the conversation, but you're like, this conversation is spinning nowhere. That's how that whole interview went.
Yeah.
So it's scary to know that, like,
there's a like a hint of like senility or something that I've been detecting like throughout the campaign.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, Trump has like been also like showing a lot of that over the last couple of years too.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're both around the same age, I guess, but not that everybody that age is going to have that. But I mean, yeah, it's true. Like, there's some signs that are starting to show up. He's not quite as sharp as he used to be.
Exactly.
And he's always been a gaffe machine, and now he's like more so.
Yeah. So I just want to take a quick second to pause. So we have another shout out. This is for you, Gift.
Oh, snap.
Yeah.
Oh, Karima. Hi, Karima. Stopping by to watch.
Thank you for watching the podcast, Karima. We appreciate it.
Yes.
And we're happy to hear that you're enjoying our discussion and our conversation.
Oh, I just realized I could see the live comments too if I just.
Yeah. So I wanted to. So Joey, I don't want to say that you stick out like a sore thumb, but so we mentioned it a little bit earlier that you are somebody who is biracial, and I'm curious to know, like, what other things you've experienced personally with respect to fitting in culturally, because we're seeing things from the Black perspective of the Black community, but then what have you ever been made to feel like you don't fit in maybe in the white community in certain ways?
Well, I mean, I was like born and raised in predominantly white communities,
Mm-hmm.
And like my family, like in my earliest days, like the Black people in my life were my family.
Mm-hmm.
In Ontario, when we'd come to Montreal, visit my grandmother and grandfather and my cousins, and
Mm-hmm.
those were the Black people in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of grew up. You heard the ugly duckling story.
Yeah.
So I always kind of grew up kind of feeling like that. Like I always related to that story because I felt like that. The way when you tell that story, the way they make you kind of empathize with that duck.
Yeah.
Like I just kind of felt like that. Like I didn't quite understand why. Like there's a little, I'm treated different and stuff like that. Like the younger you go, like the less I understood what was going on. It was just like, so it made me strive to, seek approval from people and to be liked and, to like kind of work harder at that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Acceptance wasn't really quite like a huge thing because I mean there was always going to be people that would reject me just based on like, okay, no, I don't like the way he looks. But then there were always people that accepted me too. So like my friends growing up, and like I had my best friends were white, and I just kind of came up in that. So my experience with the people that did accept me was not that they weren't accepting me. It was just that I had to kind of live life by their standards. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things like like in a white community, there's a lot of things that they're not even aware of or thinking about that they do and say that affects you in a certain way and that you take home and it hurts you. You know what I mean? So I kind of had to grow up kind of like swallowing a lot of that, and you learn very young that like when you kind of point it out or when you try to you try to make them aware so that they kind of behave a little different around you, like people usually aren't open to that. Like they get very defensive and they just they kind of make you out to be the problem for having anything to say about it. You know what I mean? So then you learn real quick to just like kind of just shut up and keep your thoughts and emotions to yourself. And then oh, sorry, give what?
Yeah, how did that affect you as you were growing up, as you were getting older?
I think like probably like I don't know, like, I'm not a psychologist or anything, but that's probably like whatever my biggest personality problems are, like with me, probably traces back to that somehow. That's my guess. But throughout my youth, I just kind of I just like sat on it. You know what I mean? I did what I did to be able to just have a social life and to get along. But then when I started growing up, it was like I had a friend, like there was a kid in my school. He moved to Laval from Jamaica, and he lived a few blocks away. So then him and I got pretty close. So he was like, like the first black kid that I kind of connected with. There was a couple other black kids in my school, but they were like they spoke French primarily, and their English wasn't very good, and so we had trouble communicating. So they never got very close with them. So this guy Damien, he was kind of the first one, and I felt like there's finally somebody I feel like I could talk to you about this kind of stuff. That kind of helped, you know what I mean? So like kind of being exposed to other people of color like kind of made me, it felt like home in a way, that like home didn't feel like home.
Yeah. I got a question for you, Joe. Two questions. You can kind of choose how you want to answer them, but how would, like, what would you say, or who would you say you identify as, and how has that viewpoint changed throughout the years for you?
Well, I've always I've always identified as black for as long as I can remember.
Mm.
It's even more. I mean, I've always acknowledged that I'm biracial, but I've always just used black as like if somebody asked or whatever.
Mm.
These days, I tend to, I don't know, I tend to get more specific for some reason.
Mm.
You know what I mean? But
But
seems there's something. I guess there's something. I guess that like the American one drop rule or something kind of crossed over into Canada.
yeah.
Like the whole so like I just was like, cops see me as black, teachers saw me as black.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like in a group of white people, like I always stood out. They always pointed out. They always wanted to touch my hair. They always were curious about,
Yeah.
They take on it. Like they come to talk to me. They put on a different voice or something around me to try to, I don't know. You know what I mean?
Hack black.
I guess so. I don't know. It's like they kind of expect it, and then they would be disappointed that I just sound just like them. You know what I mean?
I didn't mean to cut you off.
I'm giving you the space.
Okay, good. I just have to say that. Oh, my question actually for you is this: have you ever been put in a position where your white friends had to see you experience racism? Like, I'll give you an example of something that happened to me. It's a summer night. Okay, it's around this time of year. It was just after youth. I was attending Evangel at the time and stuff like that, and I was leaving. And one of my friends from the church had her brother visiting. Okay, and she asked if I could drop her and her brother home, and I was driving my dad's old beat up Buick that was his old work car. So I'm like, sure, hop in. They were just a couple blocks away from the church. And I remember I was driving and I see a cop car behind me, and I could see that one guy's typing away furiously on his computer and the other guy is kind of just monitoring. We go to the next light. Cop car pulls up next to me. Okay. Other guy's still typing away furiously. Cop looks over, him and I make eye contact, and my friend and I were all talking in the car. And she notices that I get tense, and that like my interest goes from the conversation we're having to what's going on over there. So under my breath, I kind of muttered to her, I'm like, I'm about to get pulled over. And she freaks out. She's like, what? What are you talking about? I'm like, watch. The light turns green. We go through the light. And as soon as I go through the light, lights go on. And I pull over to the side. Right away, I pull out my papers, hand them over to the police officer when he walks up. My friend had probably never been pulled over by the cops in her life before. So she's freaking out, right? And I'm like, this is because I'm black, 100%. And of course, he asks questions. Who's in the car with you? How do you know them? This car, now, this was an old Buick. It was a 1996 Buick Regal, okay, with a rust hole so big that I could fit my fist through the fender, okay? And the reason why he pulled me over was because he said, well, you didn't look like somebody born in, the year that my dad is born, sort of thing. And so I had to pull you over, and, everything checked out with the license and registration and all that stuff. So he let me go. But that was the first time that they had experienced outright racism. You know what I mean? They were from out in the middle of Canada, where it's very homogenous out there. You know what I mean? But this is such a multicultural place that they had never seen an interaction like that happen.
Yeah.
So have you had a situation where your friends were kind of having to face racism with you?
Well, there are two scenarios where directly two different ex-girlfriends that I had in my teen years that they experienced that with me very directly, but it wasn't like in the scenario that you described. It was kind of like they got to see something that they never saw before. And in this case, it was like their fathers that were extremely racist to me, like explicitly, right in front of them and right directly to me.
Yeah.
I don't think it was a situation that surprised them so much because they know their parents. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They know who they are. Like maybe they never brought a person of color home before, so maybe they weren't expecting the reactions that they got.
Right.
But they must have heard, their dads talking about people from other cultures or whatnot to get a sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there were two situations where, granted, we were teenagers, and there's one where like I met this girl at a beach party, and we kind of hit it off, so we exchanged numbers, and then we started going out, and then like after maybe a couple of weeks of us like we went out like for coffee a few times and stuff, and then at some point I went to go pick her up. We were going to another beach party, and she put out some tea, so we were just sitting in the kitchen, The dad came home, and then like she was Greek, and he walked into the kitchen, and he like sees me and he sees her. Now I get it. Also, like a dude with your teenage daughter in your kitchen, that doesn't sit well for a lot of fathers
already. Yeah.
Anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So he says, come meet me in the living room. I want to talk to you. So she goes out in there, and then I just hear him screaming at her, and it was like he kept on repeating this phrase, "Mavro puzzo," right?
Yeah.
So I later asked her what that meant, and she lied to me.
Oh my!
So I asked some of my other Greek friends what that meant, and they said, "Oh, it means black dick." So I don't know why he was yelling that, but he repeated that phrase, yelling at her multiple times.
Oh man!
I never put my hand on her. Yeah. So there was some, that was one situation. There was another situation where, I was sitting, I dropped off my girlfriend, and her and I had been dating for the whole summer. She kept it a secret from her parents, but her parents saw me a few times because I dropped her off at her place, so they saw me through the window a few times. There was one time where I went to drop her off, and we were both sitting in my car in front of the place, and then her father pulled up directly behind me, and then so I saw him get out of his car, and he looked and he sees me, and he kind of gives me this stink eye, and then he looks at her, and he kind of nods at her to get in. So she's like, "Oh, I'd have to go."
Yeah.
So I'm like, "Okay." So then she goes back inside, and I go home. By the time I got home, she called me and said, "Listen, we have to end this." I'm like, "Why? What happened? Like we were just good, 20 minutes ago." She's like, "My dad saw you out there, and he's like, let's just say he's gonna make my life miserable if I stay with you." What she said.
Wow.
And I said, "Why?" And she didn't want to say it, so I got it out of her. She said, "Because you're black."
Yeah.
So those were two explicit situations, and in both those situations they experienced it, but it's like they kind of knew where it was coming from. The second one that I told you, she went with it too. So she didn't defy it, and she lived in their house. So I guess she just figured, you know what, whatever they were gonna, whatever they were threatening her with, it wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
So those were two explicit points. There was another situation where I got pepper sprayed when my white friend was mouthing off at the cops, and I put my hand on my friend's shoulder and told him to shut up, and the cop turned around and pepper sprayed me because he thought I was being threatened.
So you got pepper sprayed for your friend.
Yeah. Some of my friends got the backdraft of it all, but I got it directly in my face. That's
not cool.
Yeah.
Did the cops apologize to you or?
No. They treated it.
Hopeful thinking.
I was the enemy in that situation.
Jeez. It's it makes me think of that story. I think you guys have seen it, the dog walker in Central Park. Yeah. So this lady that's walking her dog, not on the leash, and a guy just makes a remark to her and says, "You should, maybe have your dog on a leash." So now she gets on her high horse and wants to call the cops and say this guy's threatening her life for telling her to do exactly what she probably would have told him if he had been walking his dog without a leash,
Yeah.
And so there was a twist in the story, though. I don't know if you guys had seen this, but at one point I did see that they said that her employer decided to let her go, to terminate her,
Yeah.
And it's kind of crazy when you think about that, because I mean, this is like the year of, COVID 2019, right? Where jobs are scarce and everything like that. And it's, to lose your job on account of you just mouthing off irresponsibly. I mean, the guy didn't tell you to do anything that you shouldn't be doing anyways. He was just saying, for the sake of you and your dog, you should really have your dog on a leash,
Yeah.
but for some reason it's like, this is her excuse to now turn on the black man and try to get the police riled up and stuff like that,
You know, like, what was really vexing about that, she's like, I'm going to tell them that you're African American.
Yeah.
African American harassment. He's videotaping me. I'm like, honestly, it's like you are so aware of your privilege. It's so disgusting.
Yeah.
Right. Like she knew like how much she's aware of her privilege, and she knew that if she uses against him, like use his identity, it's all over for him.
Yeah.
It's all over.
That like that's an example to me. Like I find a lot of white people like they can be ignorant about what our experiences are.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes there's like for her, I don't know what her like if she was would deny that there's racism or something like a lot of people I know do, but that was it was instinctual. It's like, I'm going to tell them that there's an African American man threatening my life. Like she said that to him before she called the police.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When he hasn't threatened her life or anything. And it's basically like she knew that adding that adjective, African American man makes him more threatening, right? And so she went for it, and then she got on the phone with him and went into hysterics, and she kind of like choked her dog a little bit, trying to like she yanked it to put the leash on. And I see like all these people kind of freaking out about the dog.
Yeah. Outraged at how she treated the dog.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that gets you so riled up, man. It's like, you obviously care about animals more than you do black people. You know what I mean? And it's like, we can't be considered equal. You know what I mean? Like, you can't have more regard for us. Sorry?
We're trying to hide that,
This is America. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was watching that video again the other day. This is America, man. This is America.
And here's the thing that Joey, you made a point. You said something. You said maybe she's unaware of racism, but how ironic is it that she's in Central Park, where the Central Park 5 went down, with President Trump before he was a president, taking out full pages in the newspaper asking for these young black men to be killed on account of a crime that they did not commit. You understand? So, like, talk about things just repeating themselves in cycles. You know what I mean? And here's the thing that's crazy about it, okay? She said what she said. She said, I'm going to tell them that you're African American, right? As her way to leverage the police against him, okay?
Mm.
Now, I'm a person who's kind of dorky and hopeful, right? When I hear of innovations, right? And like AI is like the big thing that everybody was raving about, and how, it's going to change and revolutionize things, and, it's able to take split decisions with great accuracy, this and that, right? And I was watching an episode of Explained where they were talking about AI, and they went into a very interesting segment in which they talked about law and what AI will mean when it comes to law. And here's the thing that's messed up about it. So as anybody, like, unless you're familiar, maybe if you're not familiar with how AI works by essentially feeding tons of information into a computer. And your computer will then start to determine, based on outcomes, how it should judge things or categorize things or execute certain tasks, okay? So they were realizing that they were saying, okay, when we're training AI to be able to determine whether or not a situation is a threatening situation or a non-threatening situation, we'll feed it pictures and we'll say, this is people at a party. So all the people, a lot of the party pictures that they were finding were of white people celebrating or Asian people celebrating. But then when they saw pictures of groups of black people, it's like, this is a gang. Because throughout the interwebs, okay, if you do like Google searches, right, of groups of people at a party, you'll probably get more likely white people partying, Asian people partying, but black people, it's a street gang. And they're saying that this is going to create a bias in AI that's going to become problematic, because when it starts to study court cases and the history of how many times people of color get incarcerated, even for small little things, and how severe the penalties are, this will start to replicate itself even in AI. So you won't be able to trust AI to determine whether or not a person is guilty or not guilty in a court case.
Well, that's it. The thing about AI is that it's only as good as the data that it is fed. Right?
That's it.
So if there is a bias that goes into that is fed into it, it will replicate that. Right.
That's it.
It doesn't have an intelligence. It's going to make a future decision based on past inputs. Right.
Yeah.
That's strictly how it works. You know. Mm-hmm. So, but before we get on all of the technology thing, I want to just bring the conversation back a minute. And Joey, we look at this world we're in today, and I know we didn't get to talk much about your background and whatnot, but you're raising some beautiful kids.
Mm-hmm.
What are you, as a father, as a mixed race father, as a black father, what are you trying to do, or what legacy are you trying to instill in your children today?
Awareness, knowledge, when my ex-wife and I decided to have kids in the first place, I had like a lot of worries and concerns about how things were going to be, and I didn't know how they're gonna come out looking, so I tried to make them, because they're kind of growing up in a kind of similar situation to me, in that like right now I'm out here in the suburbs in Saint Lazare. There's not a lot of diversity of culture around here. It's mainly like, it's like kind of split down the middle, like francophone white people and anglophone white people, and then there's the rest of us is kind of peppered into the community like very scarcely,
Mm-hmm.
So I try to keep the culture alive with them, a little bit explicitly,
mm-hmm.
by just like the material that we consume for entertainment, taking them out to things, parties and stuff like that, with but like
mean gangs.
Oh yeah,
gang bangings.
I let them hang around my thugs every once in a while. But like I try to keep an awareness there, because they're growing up in a context where one day like if you look at them, you can see that like there's people kind of see them as kind of exotic looking, but they you won't look at them and say like, oh, you're a black kid, or you know what I mean. So their experience in a good way, in some ways, is that the type of racism that that was getting in my way growing up isn't getting in their way so much in the same way. You know what I mean? So for me, it's a matter of like, for me at their age, I was kind of coming to terms with that kind of thing on my own, because it wasn't like a thing that my family didn't really acknowledge too much of that, or I didn't have anybody to talk to about that kind of thing. So I was just like looking and experiencing and internalizing everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have like parents kind of teaching me like, hey, this is how the world works, and this is kind of how the world's going to respond to you in these kind of contexts. I had to learn those lessons on my own.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have those same kind of lessons for my kids because the world isn't responding to them the same way they responded to me growing up. You know what I mean? So I'm more like, trying to raise them to be aware of that kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, as if they were white kids that I want to make sure, like, I mean, they're not, but like as if they were, to be aware of like privilege, to be aware of, the unconscious biases that people have. You know what I mean? Like, if you grow up in like, around like only white kids and white friends and with white parents and stuff like that, like the entertainment you like, the music you like, the way you dress, it's all going to be, coming from one place. And there's like, if there's like a institutionalized supremacy, white supremacy, that's just kind of permeating like, the fabric of the society that you live in. You know what I mean? Like a lot of white families aren't reminded that like, no, like the stuff that we like isn't superior. It's just we like it because it's part of our culture and that's what we're exposed to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Better. You know what I mean? But that message is kind of constantly reinforced in everything. Like Little Richard and Chuck Berry create rock and roll, and Elvis is the king of rock and roll. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Was born in black communities, came from black communities. It was something that meant something to us. It was a way of communicating. It was telling the news, pretty much.
Yeah.
And, Eminem is rap god.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there's like this kind of thing.
Adele is the soul artist of the year.
Yeah. Right.
What's his name? Redhead dude with the good Ed Sheeran. Reggae artist of the year.
No, that's not true. Is that true?
Yeah. Look, man, let me Google it. But I'm pretty sure that he won some sort of award for reggae. Hang on.
Oh no, man! Don't even put that up here. Just confirm whether it's true or not. Don't put that up here.
I don't want to see it. You don't want to see it.
I really don't. Yeah. Like, man.
I try to just keep a constant stream of awareness of that kind of thing, which might be annoying sometimes. I don't know how they, but just to, help them remain connected, remember where they died comes from. And
yeah. Where is there anything, in terms of reading material, documentaries, anything you would recommend, anything you've been watching, reading with them, passing along to them, anything like that?
Not as of yet. I got a lot of stuff, but it's kind of like all the reading material that I have is kind of for when they're like a couple of years older. Like Afia might be getting into that age where she could start consuming that stuff.
Got it.
You know what I mean? But it's most of the stuff that I ended up buying over the course of my life is pretty heavy.
Yeah. And it's like I gotta, my son is the same age as Afia, and I'm like bracing myself, how, when do you pour it on? Like I this summer, especially with this with the whole COVID kind of slowdown, we've taken initiative to ramp up, that education, especially because he is a young man, and he has had not bad experiences or anything. Just he's always in the mix, though. You know what I mean? He's one of those kids. He's he's always with the popular kids in the group. He's the athletic kid and stuff like that. So he's always in the mix. And it's like, man, this is speeding up the the rate at which I gotta teach him these things, teach him how to handle himself, teach him how to, what is expected of him, teach him all those things, and it's like, man, we got this. The world is very different than when we came up. You know what I mean? Like it's different than even just 10 years ago. And there's just this whole What's the word?
Yeah, Terrence got it up.
Sorry, my bad. It was Joss Stone. Joss Stone won top reggae artist of the year.
Okay, so I can still continue vibing on Ed Sheeran.
Yeah, you can listen to your Ed Sheeran.
Thanks.
If Questlove never produced her in the beginning, maybe she wouldn't have become a reggae artist.
That's an even tougher. I would have preferred Ed Sheeran.
At least, I would have felt better a bit.
Anyways, man, you're just trying to figure out, where to point them, and what can we possibly leave them as a legacy, so that they have a beacon, to kind of like follow, you know what I mean? And that's why we started something like the Unashamed Truth, is so that they can see that, hey man, there's people like us, and there's people like us that are willing to speak up and talk about the things that that they don't see. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, anyways, that's the 2 cents. But I thought I would ask that question because I was curious to know what Joey is cooking up.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because you remember me digging into the books, especially back in the day. Like,
absolutely.
I got really nerdy into everything. As an old 40-year-old dude now, I'm a little bit more complacent. You know what I mean? But no, like, with my kids, like, it's definitely like I talk about a lot of experience, and it's always an ongoing conversation about these kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always bringing it back to that, whether it's annoying or not. That's me. You know what I mean? Whenever you see my Facebook feed or whatever, like I'm always about these topics, so it's just always a thing on my tongue, no matter where I frequent, and my kids are a part of that as well. They seem pretty grounded. You know what I mean? Like they have a pride in where they come from both sides. Mm-hmm. They're getting to that age now where they see, I mean, that they see things. They see what their dad's experience is, compared to what their mom's experience is, and you know what I mean. Like they got eyes wide open. They're probably a little bit luckier than me in some ways, in that like they're growing up in a different time, and they're growing up not as visibly, don't stand out as visibly as I do, which helps their experience in the context that they're living in right now. I'm trying to move us to LaSalle, so that might change things up a little bit too. But
come on now, we'll be neighbors.
I hope the mom's not watching this yet, because I haven't had that discussion yet.
Oh. Don't worry, I'll prep you for it. We exactly the same. We got
Yeah. Well, you had to go through that, so I definitely will have to be taking advice from you.
That's it. Don't worry, we chat about it. I got you, man.
I think we got a little piece of advice that came in for you from Karima. So I'm just going to share it. She's encouraging you. She's saying to encourage your kids to stay curious. So I think that's a big thing.
Yeah.
As a dad of 2, Black girls, my big thing is I kind of similar to you guys. Teach my kids to find who they are and to love who they are inside, so that they'll never have to feel like they don't measure up to somebody else's standards. You know what I mean? And I think as parents of color, and parents in general have to do this, but I think even more so parents of color, because our children are automatically starting at I don't want to say a disadvantage, but we're definitely always starting at a place where we have to justify who we are to people sometimes. And that becomes taxing, So when you love yourself, when you're confident in who you are, you don't need to look left and right to find your validation, because your validation comes from within,
Yes.
So that's it.
So yeah, like I know before we close up, just to let people know, like Joey is like a multi-talented guy. He's not just intelligent, but he's a great artist,
Yeah.
Yeah.
great musician. Joey, where can people check out your stuff? How is this stuff where they can follow to keep track of some of your material out there?
Okay, well, I don't have anything official going on right now. I left. I had a long run with a pretty good jazz band, but like I left them a few months ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I have if you go to Bandcamp and my name Joseph Hackle, if you search for that, you'll see some. Like I have an album up there, like just a thing I recorded at home.
Very nice.
So to find some material there. That's pretty much about it.
Awesome.
Cool. Cool.
Joey's down playing it, man, but he's the guitarist I love hearing the most. I recognize it right away, man. You know.
Yeah.
And Joey's a fantastic stand-up guy, and I said to myself, I want to raise my son to be like Joey.
Oh, damn! That's right.
There you go.
So that's where it's coming from, man. I got a ton of respect for you, and a ton of love for you, you know. And
likewise.
Man. Oh yeah.
Likewise.
So, and I just say that right back at all three of you guys too, because I played with all of you before, and yeah, you guys are all musicians that I like, respect and appreciate and feel the exact same way as what you just said.
So, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Joey. We appreciate it. Thank you for making the time to be with us. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in and watching our podcast. And this is the first of a 3-part series that we're doing. So we're going to have a few more topics of interest. The next topic we want to cover is people living with hidden disabilities. So the title of that next episode will be "You're Not Disabled Enough." Gift.
Am I disabled enough?
Am I disabled enough? I'm sorry. I totally flubbed that up.
Disabilities, yeah.
Exactly. So we want to bring some awareness to that. So we'll have another guest visiting us, 2 other guests or one other guest. We're still working that out. And then after that, we're going to tackle a topic I think that's going to be very interesting for a lot of people, but it's, am I Christian enough? And being people, men of faith and stuff like that, and differing places in our walks and stuff like that, we just want to also bring awareness to some of the stereotypes or some of the things that cause people to feel a little, I guess, out of place within church culture. So we definitely want to bring that to attention too. So please invite your friends to check out our podcast. Please invite your friends to subscribe and stuff like that. And also, we want to start hearing from our viewers. Feel free to just send us messages, on our YouTube page and stuff like that. Let us know what you guys want to hear us talk about. If there are any stories that come to mind, if there's anything you would like us, to maybe give you some space, even to come and join us to bring awareness to. We'll be more than glad to hear from you. So thank you very much for joining us, everyone.
I know Terry said invite your friends and your family and everything, but also invite your haters. We want to spread awareness. We want the haters to be here too. You know what I mean? So
yeah, we invite the hate.
We want to have the conversations, so we're not afraid.
Exactly. So thank you very much, everybody, and I wish you all a good night.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys having me on. Thank you. I love what you're doing. I'm really I'm proud of you guys for putting this thing together, and I'm honored to be a part of it today.
Awesome. And actually,
I'll be checking out every single one. So
thank you. And we plan on having Joey come back, by the way. So if you guys have appreciated him, don't worry. This is not the first or last you'll hear about Joey. And Joey, we didn't even get Joey to really rev up how he feels about some of these topics. So I'm sure that in the future you guys will hear more from Joey for sure.
Yeah.
So thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks a lot, guys. Have a great night.
Thanks. You too.
Bye.
Bye.